Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are all doing super well. So welcome to today's video. I know my voice sounds a little bit raspy. I have been sick for the past few days, which is why I haven't uploaded a video. I literally lost my voice for a few days and I'm barely getting it back, but I felt really bad about not posting, so I'm pushing through it. I have my water, I have my tea with me. Hopefully my voice makes it throughout the video. So today we're going to be talking about what happened to 14-year-old Jennifer Ertman and 16-year-old Elizabeth Peña. Now, this is just one of the most horrific, tragic, and upsetting cases I've read about in a long time. I genuinely cried while researching this case, and it's going to be difficult to hear. So just putting a warning out there, what I'm going to talk about is very disturbing and very graphic. Honestly, cases like this make you wonder how someone could do this to another human being. It is just really brutal, but what happened to Jennifer and Elizabeth truly impacted victim advocacy. Because of their case, new laws were made for victims' families, and honestly, their case is just very impactful. This case happened back in 1993, so I'm not sure if people today are aware of what happened to these girls, but I definitely want to share their story with you and keep their memory alive. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Thank you guys so much for being here and listening to Elizabeth and Jennifer's story. I truly appreciate it, and if you guys are new, welcome, bienvenidos. Hopefully you guys can join the familia and hit the subscribe button down below. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for being here, and let's jump right into today's video. So Jennifer Ertman was born on August 15th, 1978, and Elizabeth Christine Peña was born on June 21st, 1977. So her birthday literally just passed a few days ago. Both girls were from Houston, Texas, and attended Wall Trip High School. Now these girls were best friends. Elizabeth's father, Adolfo Peña, said that Jennifer was an amazing influence on his daughter. She was a positive person, caring, intelligent, and just an amazing friend. And Elizabeth was just as wonderful. She was the oldest of three and is described as being a social butterfly who was into makeup and fashion. Well, really, both girls were into fashion. Jennifer had a huge love for jewelry and clothes. I mean, she dressed really cool and definitely knew how to accessorize. She was an only child, and everyone says that she had a wonderful sense of humor. She actually tried to dabble a bit in basketball, but I'm not sure if she actually ended up playing or if she decided to try something else. Another thing about Jennifer is that she was an amazing friend. Every single person describes her as being just a true friend that had your back no matter what. She would literally give you her clothes off her back in order to help you. Based on what I've read, Elizabeth and Jennifer seemed like such amazing, beautiful, and kind young girls with so much to live for. They had dreams, they had aspirations, they had a full life to live. So fast forward to Thursday, June 24th, 1993. 16-year-old Elizabeth Peña and 14-year-old Jennifer Ertman had plans to attend a pool party later that evening. So at around 4:45 p.m., Jennifer's father, Randy, dropped her off at Elizabeth's home to hang out for a bit before the pool party. Then at around 8 p.m., Elizabeth's mother, Melissa, dropped the girls off at their friend Gina's house, who was the one that was hosting the pool party. Now, Elizabeth and Jennifer were so excited about this pool party. You know, it was just going to be a fun, chill day, hanging out at the pool with their friends and just enjoying the summer night. Now, they understood that they couldn't be out all night long. They did have an 11:30 p.m. curfew, so they reassured their parents that they would be home by then. So the girls are at the pool party, they're having fun with their friends, they're enjoying this beautiful summer night, and time is going by very quickly. Before they know it, their 11:30 p.m. curfew is quickly creeping up on them, so they decide to leave the pool party and see if they could make it home on time. Now, they had a couple of options as to how they could get home. They could either take their normal route by going through TC Jester Boulevard and then turning onto Lamont Lane, which is where Elizabeth lived. Or if they wanted to save some time, they could take a shortcut through TC Jester Park. If they took the shortcut, I believe this would save them about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, the girls were really worried that they weren't going to make it home before their curfew, so they decided to take the shortcut. This meant that they were going to have to walk through the park alone and cross through a railroad bridge to get home. So the girls left Gina's apartment, headed over to the park, and began making their way home. The following morning on Friday, June 25th, Sandra Ertman woke up at around 4 a.m. Now, she noticed that the bedroom light in Jennifer's room was still on, which she thought was really strange. Jennifer had this routine that anytime she would come home, she would turn the light off in her bedroom to let her parents know that she finally made it. So the light was still on, and she thought this was really strange. When Randy woke up later that morning, he also noticed that the bedroom light was on, so he asked his wife if maybe Jennifer had slept over at Elizabeth's house or at Gina's house. Sandra said she wasn't really sure, and by 11 o'clock that morning, both Sandra and Randy were calling the Peña residence, were calling Gina's house and other friends to see if anyone knew where their daughter was. I believe the Peñas were at work during that time, so they weren't picking up the phone. Now, at around 1 p.m., Randy goes to speak with Gina, and she says that the last time she saw the girls was at around 10:45 p.m. the previous night, and she last saw them heading over to Elizabeth's house. She told Randy that she could go with him to the Peña house to knock on the door and see if the girls were there, so that's what they did. It's reported that Randy was running around the house, banging on every window and calling out his daughter's name. But since the Peñas were at work, no one was home and no one answered the door. So Randy went to go drop Gina off back at her house, and then he headed back to the Peña residence, and that's when he finally ran into Adolfo and Melissa. Now, Elizabeth's parents said that they also hadn't seen the girls since the night before. Now the families began to panic, and they called 911 and reported the girls as missing. Both families immediately began to search for their daughters, and they printed out flyers to pass around the neighborhood. They were also going door to door asking any of the neighbors if they had seen their daughters, but no one had. It wasn't until 4 days after Elizabeth and Jennifer disappeared that an anonymous tip was sent to the Crime Stoppers unit, letting them know exactly where they could find the bodies of the girls. This caller said that the girls were at TC Jester Park next to the Bayou. So an officer named Mike Cromwell began searching the area and soon was joined by other officers. They first crossed the railroad track and then started searching near the edge of the tree line. That's when they spotted what appeared to be an item of girls' clothing. However, as they got a closer look, they realized that it wasn't just girls' clothing, it was actually not one, but two bodies. They were both less than 20 feet away from the perimeter of the trees inside a small clearing. Both females were lying on their back, just a few feet apart from each other, and were badly decaying due to the summer heat. As police started looking around the crime scene, they determined that there must have been several perpetrators because they discovered numerous footprints around the bodies. Now, while all of this is going on, Randy Ertman is currently speaking to a reporter about his daughter's disappearance. He's talking to this man when all of a sudden, the reporter gets a call on his radio letting him know that a body has been found. Of course, Randy heard this and he immediately believed that that was his daughter, Jennifer. So he quickly drove over to the crime scene and tried to get past the barricade, but police were literally holding him back. He was trying to fight through them, and all he was shouting was, "Does she have blonde hair?" And unfortunately, one of the girls did. Now, since the bodies were badly decomposing, they had to be identified through their dental records. Through this, police were able to confirm that the bodies were of 14-year-old Jennifer Ertman and 16-year-old Elizabeth Peña. I mean, that just broke my heart. The fact that these two beautiful young girls were just lying there on the grass in the summer heat, decaying all alone for 4 days. It's just really scary. And I saw this photo that I'll put right here of Randy sitting on the railroad close to where his daughter's body was found. And that photo, you guys, it is just so impactful. And, wow, like he truly is such a strong person. So an autopsy was done on the girls, and this determined that their cause of death was by strangulation. So now that the girls had been found, police were determined to find whoever was responsible for their death. Although the tip made to Crime Stoppers was anonymous, police decided to trace the call and see who it was. And when they did, it led them to the home of Joe and Peter Cantu. Now, I don't believe Peter was home at the time. I believe only Joe was home. So police questioned him, and he did identify himself as the anonymous tipster. He then gave police the name of 5 men and said, "Those are the guys that killed those girls." And what's crazy is that one of the perpetrators was Joe's own brother, Peter Cantu. So police go to check Peter's room, and inside, they found several pieces of jewelry belonging to the girls. This pretty much confirmed to police that what Joe was saying was true. So now that police had found the girls' bodies and they knew the names of the perpetrators, they wanted to know what really happened that night. So let's backtrack a bit and go to the day that Jennifer and Elizabeth were murdered. As I had mentioned earlier in the video, Jennifer and Elizabeth decided to take a shortcut through TC Jester Park in order to make it home for their curfew. Now mind you, this was late at night. This was at around 10:45, almost 11 p.m. It's really not the best or the safest place for someone to be alone at night, especially as young teenage girls. So Jennifer and Elizabeth are going along the route when they pass by two men. Now these men didn't holler at the girls, they didn't, speak to them, they literally said nothing, they just passed the girls and went along their way. These two guys were later identified as brothers Roman and Frank Sandoval. It turns out that these brothers had just left a gang initiation that was going on in the park. This initiation consisted of 6 men, all who were relatively young. I mean, they were between the ages of 14 to 18 years old, so pretty much teenagers. This group consisted of 18-year-old Jose Medellin, Derek O'Brien, and Peter Cantu, along with 17-year-old Efrain Perez and 14-year-old Venancio Medellin. The new member that was being initiated was 17-year-old Raul Villarreal. So these 6 guys, along with the Sandoval brothers, had met at the park and were initiating Raul. After Raul was accepted to the group, they decided to hang out, have some beers, and just stay at the park. However, the Sandoval brothers said that they wanted to go home, so they left. Now, it would have been amazing if these brothers had told Elizabeth and Jennifer, hey, a gang initiation is going on down the hill, don't go that way, or, turn around, or, had warned them. That literally would have been amazing and would have saved their lives, but unfortunately, they did not warn the girls. Now, I believe Elizabeth was a little bit ahead of Jennifer, so she was the first one to encounter one of the gang members named Jose Medellin. Now, when Elizabeth passed by him, he attempted to grope Elizabeth, and she kind of just brushed him off and continued to walk away. Now, of course, this made Jose upset, and he said, "No, baby, where are you going?" And then he grabbed Elizabeth by the neck and dragged her down the incline. Elizabeth began to scream for help, and of course Jennifer heard this. Now, according to reports, Jennifer was nowhere near the group and she could have escaped and ran away to get help, but since she heard her best friend crying out for help, she decided to go back and save her friend. I mean, how amazing is Jennifer? Like, she truly is a definition of a best friend. I truly don't know if many people would go back and save their friend in this type of situation, but that's exactly what Jennifer did. Now, I've seen some reports stating that Jennifer had only seen the one gang member, Jose, so maybe she thought that it was just going to be her and Elizabeth against this one guy, and that maybe she did have a chance of saving her friend. She didn't know that there were also 5 other men below the incline. So, as Jennifer ran back to save Elizabeth, she ended up getting grabbed by one of the other gang members and pushed to the ground. Now, again, I just want to put a quick warning out there because what I'm going to talk about is very disturbing and graphic. For the next hour, Jennifer and Elizabeth were R-worded by the gang and brutally assaulted. They forced the girls to remove their clothes and they R-worded them vaginally, anally, and orally. Throughout this hour, the girls did fight back. Jennifer was biting at her attackers and Elizabeth was kicking her legs in the air and screaming. I mean, they were overpowered by these 6 men, but they still did whatever they could and they fought for their lives. It's said that the girls would often glance at each other through the attack, which would make them cry even more. And wow, I just get so emotional reading that and saying that because I cannot imagine what they were going through in their last moments. I mean, imagine you're getting brutally attacked and assaulted right next to your best friend, and you have to hear your best friend scream and fight for her life while you're also trying to do the same. It's just a lot, and these young, beautiful girls did not deserve this. So after the members R-worded the girls, the leader of the group, 18-year-old Peter Cantu, said that he didn't want to risk the girls being able to identify them later, and he told the other gang members that they needed to kill them. At this point, the new member, Raul, yelled at Jennifer and told her to get on her knees. Then, both him and O'Brien strangled Jennifer with a red nylon belt, which actually ended up breaking, so they switched over and began to use a shoelace. They made Elizabeth watch this entire thing, and after they had killed Jennifer, she began to plead for her life. She even told the guys that she would give them her phone number so that they could hang out later if they let her go. Like, she was saying and doing whatever she could could to save her life. However, this didn't work, so Elizabeth made one final attempt to run away. But unfortunately, she was caught and then kicked in the face and in her body, which fractured several of her ribs and broke several of her teeth. Then Peter, Jose, and Efrain strangled Elizabeth to death with multiple shoelaces. I mean, it's just brutal, you guys. Like, I know what I said is very graphic and disturbing, but that's not even all the details. I left some of the graphic and, just truly traumatizing details out because I couldn't even say it. Like, I can't even repeat those actions because that is just the most inhumane thing I've ever heard in my life. What these girls went through is just absolutely brutal, and these men did not have any mercy. As I said in the start of the video, I don't understand how someone could do this to another human being. So after they killed Elizabeth and Jennifer, members of the group, except O'Brien, headed over to Peter Cantu's home where his brother Joe and sister-in-law Christina lived. Now when they got there, Christina noticed that the men had blood on their shirts and they just looked very rough. Like they looked like they had just been in a fight, so she asked them what happened. This is when it's reported that Jose responded with, "We had some fun." Then they all went into detail about what they had done to the girls. I mean, none of the members seemed remorseful. They were just hanging out at Peter's house talking about this so casually as if it wasn't just a horrific and brutal thing. It's reported that Christina and Joe were not happy about this conversation. They were actually disgusted with what the members had done, but in the moment, they remained silent and just listened to what they had to say. Then Peter began to divide the valuables that they had stolen from the girls, which was mainly just some jewelry pieces. One of the items was this ring that had the letter E on it, and Jose decided to take the ring so he could gift it to his girlfriend Esther. You're gonna give your girlfriend a ring that belongs to the girl that you just brutally assaulted and murdered? I don't even understand. So after the members left the house, Christina told Joe that she was very upset with what just happened and that he needed to call the police and turn his brother in. Now at first, Joe was hesitant to do this because that's his brother. He didn't want the members of the gang to know that he was the one that had snitched, and he was just feeling a little nervous. But Christina told him that she was just so disgusted with what the group did and that she couldn't stop thinking about it. Unfortunately, Christina was also a victim of gang rape, so this heavily impacted her. She told her husband that he needed to call Crime Stoppers and let them know where the girls were. She felt sorry for the families and wanted them to be able to lay their daughters to rest. Christina reassured him and said that he could leave an anonymous tip and no one would ever find out that it was him. So the following day, Joe contacts the Crime Stoppers unit and in a hushed tone he says, "I know where you can find those dead girls. Right off TC Jester next to the Bayou, the White Oak Bayou." Now on this call, Joe did not reveal his name, nor did he reveal who was responsible for the murders. So within hours of the phone call, police went to go search the park, they searched the railroad track area, and they searched the Bayou, but they didn't find the girls' bodies. Now Joe was checking in on the news just to see if they had finally found the girls' bodies and if his tip had worked, but since the girls' bodies weren't found, there weren't any news reportings about it. So he decided to call back the Crime Stoppers unit and gave them a better description of where the girls' bodies were located. This is when, 4 days later, the bodies of Elizabeth and Jennifer were finally found by police. I mean, honestly, Christina is a true hero. She didn't care that this was her brother-in-law. She didn't care that these were gang members. Like, she did not care. All she wanted was for the families to be able to find their daughters and lay them to rest. So I'm so happy she was able to convince her husband to turn his own brother in. I know that must have been scary, but I'm so happy that they did the right thing. So then, on June 29th, 1993, all 6 members were arrested. When police knocked on O'Brien's door, he attempted to flee out the back door, but he was captured by police officers that were waiting there for him. The officers told him that he was being arrested for capital murder, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's about those girls." So he already knew it was coming. Then when he got to the police station, he admitted to the officers that he was the one that gave the red belt to Jose in order to strangle Jennifer. And when police searched O'Brien's apartment, they did end up finding the red nylon belt. And what's even more messed up is that when the girls' bodies were found, a large crowd had gathered along the railroad tracks near the crime scene. Among the crowd was the girl's friend, Gina, who of course was very distraught distraught and heartbroken because her best friend's bodies had just been found. So she was standing in the crowd crying, and she heard a man say, "I hope they catch those responsible." Well, it turns out that that man was Derek O'Brien. He was literally captured on video at the crime scene among the crowd, smiling. It's reported that when Randy finally got to the crime scene, O'Brien smiled at him, waved, and then walked away. I don't know if that's 100% true, but that's just what I've seen on some reports. So at first, when Joe spoke to the police and gave them the 5 names of the men involved, he didn't tell them about Raul because he didn't even know that he was a part of the gang, since he literally had just been initiated that night. So I'm not sure how police found out about him. Don't know if maybe the other gang members, gave his name up or what happened, but he was also arrested. So the trials began, and each member was tried separately, which meant that the families literally had to hear the graphic and horrific details about their daughter's death 6 different times. It was brutal, but in the end, 5 out of the 6 men were given the death sentence. The only member that was not given the death sentence was 14-year-old Venancio Medellin. He was only given 40 years, which I'm sure is very upsetting to the family. He will be around 54 years old when he's finally released. So Jose Medellin, Peter Cantu, and Derek O'Brien have all been executed, and I believe Elizabeth and Jennifer's family attended every single execution. It's reported that O'Brien did feel some remorse towards the end. He apologized to the families and said it was the worst mistake that he had ever made. Jose also felt some remorse, and just a few minutes before his death, he apologized to the girl's family and to his own. The only one that did not have any final words was Peter Cantu. Adolfo and Melissa Peña said that it didn't really matter that he had no final words because there's nothing he could have said that would have made a difference. And it's crazy because I was watching this clip of Peter's trial, and some of his friends were there defending him. Literally defending him, saying that the court was only focusing on the bad and they weren't focusing on the good of Peter.
But Cantu's friends say authorities are unfairly bringing up old problems.
They're taking the bad side of the story of him. They're not taking the good side of him. I mean, he is being good to us, and I think he's been there for us, and his actions to be there for him.
Morales says she's the girlfriend of one of the other 4 men charged with capital murder in the same case. Each will be tried separately.
I just don't understand how you could be defending him. I mean, he literally was the one that said, "Let's kill the girls." Now, Efrain and Raul's sentences were reduced from the death penalty to just life in prison. The reason this happened is because the both of them were 17 years old when this crime occurred, and the Supreme Court had just barred the execution of people that were under the age of 18 when the crimes occurred. So for now, the 2 of them will be spending the rest of their life in prison. The deaths of Elizabeth and Jennifer greatly affected the people of Houston.
Beth, we miss you.
Family and friends gather on a somber afternoon to remember 2 teenagers whose tragic deaths shattered so many lives.
We will never know the potential good things that they could have done, the joys that they could have had. This case really brought Houstonians, got their attention, made them understand that gang violence was real.
To this day, in 2022, the community continues to remember what happened to these beautiful girls. One way they remember the girls is through a memorial that was placed at TC Jester Park. In the park, there are 2 stone memorial benches in honor of the girls. Each bench is inscribed with the girl's name, and people visit this spot to leave flowers, balloons, and to just remember them. This is where the girls held their last breath, and now people can go there to honor their memory, reflect on what happened, and just keep their name alive.
The pain and anger also overwhelming for the girls' friends. Many seek comfort sitting on the memorial benches, remembering.
Jennifer was always happy, in a good mood.
We try to constantly remember them and say prayers.
I also saw a report talking about how a signature bridge has been in the making to commemorate the lives of Elizabeth and Jennifer. There's this civil engineer called Chris Barhart who lives in the area and believes that hike and bike trails could be useful to the park, and making this bridge would help provide people with access to these trails. If he builds this bikeway bridge, then lots of people would be moving throughout the park, and this could potentially make it safer. You know, back in 1999, when Jennifer and Elizabeth were walking through this park, there really wasn't a lot of movement. There weren't really a lot of pedestrians going through the park, which is why troublemakers like to go and hang out there, because it was very lonely. So Chris thinks that if he makes this bridge and he makes his trails, then people would often be moving around the park, which would make it safer, and hopefully these troublemakers would want to stop hanging out there. I believe this article was from 2014, so I'm not sure if the bridge and the trails were actually made. If you're from the area, let me know if that actually happened, but I do think it's a great idea. Now, something else that came out of this tragic event is that the murders of Elizabeth and Jennifer had a huge impact on victim advocacy. Randy Ertman, Sandra Ertman, Adolfo Peña, and Melissa Peña became the faces of the crime victims in Harris County, Texas. All 4 parents attended every day of the trial for the 6 men. They truly are such incredibly strong people. They showed the world what it was like to be a victim, but not a helpless victim. They worked closely with this victim's advocate named Andy Cahan, but he was amazing and helped the girls' families go through this tiring trial.
The case that shaped Andy Kahn is the newly appointed crime victims advocate for the city, and he promised their families.
We can't go back and change what happened to your family, but we're going to make things better for others to come along, and your daughters are going to leave a lasting legacy that's going to last for eternity.
When the judge asked the parents if they wanted to address Peter, Randy immediately hopped on and told Peter what he needed to say. A lot of people criticized the judge for allowing this because Randy was telling Peter that he was an animal, and, he was like yelling at him and just, obviously upset, and people thought this was wrong. People were like, oh my God, how can you let this chaos go on in court? And, Randy shouldn't be yelling at this guy.
When he confronted one of his daughter's killers in court.
Look at me! Look! You're not even an animal.
And it's like, what do you mean? This guy literally murdered his daughter. He has every right to say how he feels and insult him. And because of Randy making a statement to Peter, victims' families can now make an impact statement during trial after the sentencing has been decided, which I think is amazing. I think this gives the victims' families a voice, and it allows them to express what they're feeling and speak directly to the people that have hurt their loved one. Another law that was changed because of Jennifer and Elizabeth's death is that now the victims' families can witness the execution of the perpetrator. Before this case, relatives of the victims were prohibited from viewing the execution. But now that's all changed. I hope seeing their execution did bring them some type of closure. Adolfo Peña said, "Why do I watch? For justice. For justice for my little girl." They fought so hard for their daughters to have justice, and they continue to do so to this day. The 6 men have tried to appeal their convictions, and every single time that they've tried to ask for parole or, try to overturn something, they've been denied. Anytime one of them made an appeal, Jennifer and Elizabeth's families were there, ready to fight back, along with members of the community. Venancio Medellin, who was only 14 years old at the time of the murders, has been denied parole over 5 times. Anytime he was up for parole, the families would meet with the pardons and parole board to try and convince them to keep Venancio behind bars. Randy Ertman said, "I want this man to be in prison for the rest of his life. I'm sorry I said man. I want that piece of crap to die in prison, and I'll do whatever I have to make sure he stays in prison. Would you want him to be your neighbor? Would you want him living next to you?" Jenny and Elizabeth didn't have a choice. He had a choice. He could have walked away, but he didn't. Now, there was a book made called Pure Murder by a true crime author, Corey Mitchell. From what I've seen, it's a pretty popular book. He basically talks about what happened to Jennifer and Elizabeth. He provides a background on the convicts, and he interviews people involved in the case. I did hear people say that he does go into very graphic detail and that it was difficult to read. So just keep that in mind if you're ever thinking about checking it out. There is this YouTube channel called Lamont at Large. His channel is really amazing. I highly recommend you guys go check it out. But he did this video where he went to Texas and recreated the route that Jennifer and Elizabeth would have taken the night they were killed. And I feel like watching that video just made it even more real. You know, seeing someone actually stand there at the spot where these girls took their last breath, it just makes it more real. And I hope to this day people continue to visit the memorials, you know, leave the girls flowers and, you know, show them some love. So unfortunately, in 2014, 61-year-old Randy Ertman passed away due to lung cancer, which just broke my heart. I know that I didn't even know Randy in person, but just reading about him and, you know, hearing what type of person he was truly impacted me. He was a strong, courageous, and loving person. Jennifer was his only daughter, and not only did he fight for justice for her, but also justice for other victims. You know, like I said, he had a huge impact on victim advocacy, and, you know, because of him wanting to make a statement to Peter, and because of him wanting to watch the executions, laws were changed and now victims' families have more rights. He truly was an amazing person, so I hope he's reunited with his daughter Jennifer now, and, you know, I hope he rests in peace. As for Sandra, Adolfo, and Melissa, as well as other members of the family, I hope they all have some type of closure and are doing well. I'm so sorry that this happened to your beautiful daughters. They did not deserve this, and what happened to them was so unfair. And you know, a lot of people blame the parents, and they're like, why didn't you pick up the girls from the party? Like, why would you let them walk home alone? And you know, I just feel like that's not helpful. They don't need to be reading negative comments about their parenting skills. But at the end of the day, these 6 guys are the ones that are responsible for what happened to Jennifer and Elizabeth, not the parents. I just hope that people never forget about Jennifer and Elizabeth. Their names deserve to live on, and we will do our best to keep their memory alive. Alright you guys, that's pretty much it for today's video. My voice literally cannot anymore. Like, I need to stop talking. So thank you guys so much for being here and listening to Elizabeth and Jennifer's story. I would love to know what you guys think about this down below, and let's just keep remembering the girls and honoring their names. I truly appreciate you guys being here, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys!